Hi, I'm CJ. I hope my YouTube channel, 5 Minute Christianity, is truly a blessing to you. Just want to call attention to one little thing. At the beginning of each video, I try to include the name of the sermon from which it came, so that you can go back later and watch the entire sermon when you have time. That's all. Thanks.
The flesh wants to control you. It wants to have you think bad. It wants to have you feel bad. It wants to create anger, hostility, bitterness, jealousy, envy, strife. It wants to make you sure that you have reason to fear. It wants to make you doubt God. It wants to take love out of your heart and replace it with hatred. It wants to make you do wrong things and fill your life with guilt. It wants to destroy your marriage. It wants to destroy your home. It wants to destroy your relationships. It wants to make you useless to God. The flesh lusts all the time, desiring what is wrong, what is destructive. And the only hope of overcoming it is to walk in the Spirit. You see, you cannot offer a human solution for a spiritual problem. The answer to overcoming the lust of the flesh is not pragmatics. It's not methodology. It's certainly not psychology. It's not some human effort. It's not somebody's good idea. It's not somebody's clever plan. It's not somebody's system. The way you overcome the driving, compelling compulsions of the lust of the flesh is simply by walking by the Spirit. You say, well, that sounds easy enough. Well, it does sound easy enough, and it's very simple. But let me take you to a second point. We saw the command in verse 16. Let me be honest enough to say what Paul said and tell you there's a conflict. That's the second point. We move from command to conflict. It's easy to articulate the principle. It's very difficult to live it. Have you noticed that? Very difficult. So we come to the conflict in verse 17. The conflict is assumed in verse 16. Obviously, the indication here is that the desire of the flesh is messing us up, and the only way to overcome it is to walk by the Spirit. But he gets specific in verse 17, and he tells us about the conflict. For the flesh sets its desire against the Spirit. That's a capital S. We're talking here about the Holy Spirit. The flesh sets its desire against the Spirit. That's why there's conflict in the life of a Christian. By the way, that's a conflict that doesn't exist in the life of a non-Christian. Why? Because he doesn't possess what? The Spirit. Talked to a friend of mine, professional athlete. I asked him, since you become a Christian, has your life changed in terms of what you do? He said, my former life before I was a Christian was the worst. It was the scum. He said, I was a sinner of the worst order, into every sin imaginable. I said, let me ask you a question. We were just chatting casually. I said, did it bother you to live like that? He said, bother me? No. I enjoyed it. He said, I loved it. He said, man, I was really into that. I said, did you feel guilt? He said, no. Did you feel at all restrained when you would start to engage in that? He said, no. He said, there was no battle because he didn't have the Holy Spirit. So it was the flesh and the flesh and the flesh and the flesh. There's no conflict. I said, what happened when you became a Christian? He said, all those things began to be the things I hated. And a conflict was engaged. And that's exactly right.